Hi, my name is Guzman, and I'm here with Kristi, and we're going to be talking about one of the blended learning models called flipped learning. So before we get started, we're going to take you to our face-to-face and VLA support website to show you how you can get to the flipped learning page. So here on the homepage, you'll notice the purpose, the SWAT team that might be available at your school for additional help. And up at the top, you'll notice the different phases. Currently, we'll start flipped learning in phase 2. So you'll click on phase 2 and then on blended learning. Once you see blended learning, you'll notice that there are 3 different models. The reason for this is that there are 3 different ways in which students can have control over their time, place, pace, and pathway with their learning. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to be focusing on, in this video, about flipped learning. So we'll click on the flipped learning icon to get to our materials. You might have heard of flipped classroom, but flipped learning is just a little bit different. Typically, when we think of flipped classroom, that all of our learning is going on within the classroom. However, as we know now, our reality is a little bit different, to where we still have kiddos at home and we still have kiddos that are coming to school like they normally would. So with flipped learning, this is just showing that our learning can take place anywhere, and that our learning doesn't just has to be the direct instruction. This can also take place any place within the lesson plan cycle. The reason that flipped learning is going to be such a great resource for you in your classroom is that students can have control over their pace. Some of our kids, as we know, whenever we're teaching a subject, we might have to repeat things more than once. Unfortunately, with some of our VLA learners and even with our face-to-face learners, we aren't going to have that luxury. So if we present our information within a video or within some kind of educational technology tool, our students have the pace in which they can control. Also, with flipped learning, the teacher can be more intentional with their synchronous time. We know that time is so precious right now. So if we can get our direct teach piece or whatever part of the lesson plan cycle you choose away from students, we can be more intentional with our synchronous time. Lastly, students can have access to the content during any time, and we can really differentiate and personalize our learning for our students, so that way they have access to this learning at all times. As we move down on the website, you'll notice some different questions to consider, as well as some examples of which flipped learning has taken place within classrooms in Mesquite ISD. When we think about these questions to consider, we're also not only thinking about the logistical side of what a flipped lesson could look like, but also we're thinking about the alignment pieces and how we're going to gather that formative assessment. So you can review those at your own time. Underneath our examples, we have Learning for Success. Here we're going to review the flipped classroom in the modules, but we're also going to talk about different ways in which you can deliver videos and instruction to students. And here are some of our top 4 ways in which you can deliver those things to your students. These are not the only tools that you can use to deliver flipped instruction, so please do not feel limited. These are just some great examples and great ways that we've seen teachers deliver flipped instruction to our students.
Okay. So sometimes when flipped learning, you hear it as flipped classroom, and sometimes you also hear flipped classroom where it's just, I'm going to watch a video for my instruction, and then the teacher is going to come and do a teach piece. And it doesn't always have to be that way. And so Katie did talk about that there are other tools and there are other ways to deliver that instruction that's not just a video. But if you're starting out a video, I want to make sure that you point out that there are ways, there are different approaches to the videos. And so I've been talking to teachers, and we've been talking a lot about point A and point B. And so if you're at the very beginning of your journey with flipped learning and you want to start in the with videos, then doing a screencast is absolutely the first step. It's your point A. And so this is an example of a teacher here in the district, and she creates screencast for her instruction. And the students get to watch the video, and then if they need extra support, they get to come and pull a small group. But the really interesting, really cool thing about it is that they are the ones that take ownership, and they're the ones that say, I want to go to the small group because I'm not understanding, or I didn't get the information as much as I could have gotten it if I would have heard it from a different perspective or a different time. And so this is an example of a screencast. And I do want to point out that she puts her teak on every single page as they're working through the different problems. And I really like that because it allows for the students to see, this is my goal, this is my objective, as they're progressing through the learning. If you are wanting to take it one step further, because in my opinion, flipped learning, the important part and the essential piece is that formative assessment along the way. And so with EdPuzzle, it allows for students to see the formative assessment. So it allows for them to check their understanding and then for them to get immediate feedback for responses. So this is an example of an EdPuzzle, and this is an example of questions throughout. So every time you see a little drop, that's a question that the students, that the teacher has posed and that the students will answer. And so we're going to come back to this example a little bit later. So if we go through and look at the bottom of this sheet on the website, it points out benefits and considerations for some of the different tools that Katie had talked about. And so I'm just going to do a really quick rundown about that. And so with EdPuzzle, it has great formative assessment along the way, but in order to save the data, you link it to your Google Classroom. And it is possible for Seesaw users, but it is more difficult. Okay, so it's something to think about. With ClassKick, it gives immediate feedback for students, but the great thing about it is that it's two-way communication. So not only do the students get feedback from the teacher, but then the students can say, I need help. I need to talk about this specific concept. And so that allows for the beginnings of student agency. Another one for Pear Deck is that they get to receive feedback. So as your students are working through the learning, then the teacher can give feedback to the students on what this teacher is seeing in real time. Another way that is really good for flipped instruction is that if the teacher sees that if she's doing aggressive monitoring and sees that even her high students are not understanding, it's a good time for her to stop or him to stop the instruction, to change it to teacher pace, and then to have those conversations and those quick direct teach moments. And then Google Forms is also a great way if you use logic branching, because it allows for that feedback for the students to see, I'm getting this wrong, I'm not getting this, I'm getting this correct. And you can provide extra support for students that aren't understanding embedded into the Google form. Okay, there are things to consider about each, so make sure that you determine your goal for the students and for learning, and then see what tool will meet that need the most. So when we are balancing virtual versus face-to-face, this is something to look at, okay? In creating digital live lessons, we did professional learning on that, and so the resources are actually in our YouTube channel, and there are some linked onto this website. But we broke it up into 4 pieces, and so I took that same model of breaking it into 4 pieces, and we looked at how that looks when a flipped instruction model. So the first thing is to launch the lesson. So that's engaging the learner. So that's what we typically call a hook. But I wanted to think that engage the learners is not just about we're going to hook them, but we're also going to make sure that we give them something that they want to learn more about. So so that's why it's the same. But and then we also set the expectation, and this can be done asynchronously. So we can post it in Google Classroom or in Seesaw, and whether the students are face-to-face or virtual, they can work through this launch. Then is the teach piece. So it's the instruction. And this instruction is the part of flipped instruction that they're doing independently. Okay, so if you think about flipped instruction, this teach piece is what the teacher could normally stand up and have that direct teach moment. But instead of having that direct teach moment, their students are going to progress through the learning independently using a tool that best fits their needs. Okay. The key for this teach piece is to have formative assessment embedded throughout. And the reason for that is so that during the evidence of learning, where they show what they know, that you're utilizing that formative assessment and maximizing it. And what I mean by that is utilizing what it is that they're learning as they're progressing, and that's the next piece. So if you had an independent performance task, then taking the information that you gained as the teacher from that formative assessment and then tweaking what you might have already had prepared ahead of time. Okay, because if you're doing something about summary and the students already understand summary, then your performance task may want to adapt based on the needs of the students. Okay, so just utilizing that formative assessment and maximizing all its potential. Another part of the evidence of learning could be pulling small groups. So it could be taking similar or unique students as they went through the teach piece, and then being able to have those intentional moments with the students that's directed towards their needs. Another part of evidence of learning could be a whole group discussion. So taking the top 2 misconceptions and then having an in-depth collaborative discussion about those misconceptions to be able to bring home and to be able to really solidify that information that some students or most students may have had problems with. And then the last part is the closure. And so I would stagger this, and I believe that this could be a really great synchronous moment. So when you think about the virtual students and the different check-ins, that your check-in could actually be for flipped instruction towards the end of class and not necessarily the beginning of class. And this would be a great time to wrap up the lesson for today, and then for the students to begin self-reflection, because it's really important for the students to start taking ownership of their learning and to be able to understand what it is that they have learned and what it is that they are still needing to learn from that concept. And so if you look at the example that I said that we would get back to, this is an EdPuzzle. And so the teacher, she started the class by launching the lesson. And so her question in Google Classroom was, why or why not do you like short films? And so the students got to talk about, and they got to reflect on what it is that they liked. And so some of the students said that, they were able to understand what was happening, even though words weren't happening, because some of the most of the shorts, they don't have words in their short films. This was also a chance for students to say, hey, I've never watched a short film before. And so for other students to respond and talk about in their own words what they think shorts are. So it's a great way to engage those learners and what's about to happen. And so then the instruction was making inferences, and it was using this short video with embedded questions along the way. And I wanted to point out the different questions. And so I really like the questions that she answered, or she asked, because it says, how does the stork feel about delivering the alligator, and how do you know? So it's not just, one part of how do they feel, but it's also, why did you think that? And what evidence do you have? Because a good inference is taking background knowledge and then information that they gain from the text or from the multimedia, and then to be able to have an inference that can be backed up by evidence. And so I think that it's really important that the teacher was able to ask the how do you know? And so what they do is they just progress through the learning, and along the way, the teacher is able to see what the students are, how they're understanding and what they're getting. Then from this, she then had targeted small groups, and so each small group that she met with, and it didn't matter what how much time, it was based on what the students needed and what those needs were, and so she was able to target those unique questions and be able to provide provide a more individualized lesson. And so that's an example of a flipped instruction and how you can best meet each other's, the students' needs. So this was a very, very quick and crash course of flipped instruction. And make sure that you reach out to your instructional technology coach if this is the beginning stage for you and you're ready to dive deeper. Thanks for watching.